So design, bid, build, and construction manager are sort of the three main systems for how these things get organized for project delivery. There are a number of other ones available to you though. One of them is Fasttrack, and I love talking about Fasttrack because it's so ridiculous. It's ridiculous but useful. So in very specific situations, the economics of land holding and other things can actually require that doing something Fasttrack makes sense. So how this works is there's going to be a process where the architect is designing, say, the excavation and foundation system, and then that gets handed over to the contractor, and they build out the foundation. While that's being built, the architect might be designing the shell system, the structural system, say, and then the contractor is going to build the structural system. And then the architect is designing the shell system, those curtain walls, say, and then the contractor is going to be, so everything is overlapped, and as soon as you finish the design work of one of those packages, it then gets handed off to the contractor. And once that gets handed off, they start building. Well, clearly, you're going to have some mistakes and problems, right? You can't possibly have known exactly what the interior finishes were going to be if all you've done is set up the foundation. And if something needs to get changed down the road, you're going to have to go back through and make some fixes and changes that happen. That's sort of built into Fasttrack. So why on earth would anybody ever do a project where they know they're going to be making mistakes? Well, the reason you might do it is because the cost of holding land can be so enormous in certain situations. So imagine yourself, you're building a project in downtown Manhattan or downtown Chicago or something in Tokyo or something like that. And you've got a big empty site. Well, if it's going to take, say, 15 months to build out that building, that's an awful lot of time where that land is not actually producing any income, depending on if it's retail or even office space or any of those kinds of things. Developers need to be able to have income coming back in, and if the holding costs are so expensive, you can get a very serious situation where you have millions of dollars just going to the banks during the process of building the building out. So the Fasttrack, what it does is it speeds all of that up. And so yeah, you're going to make mistakes and you're going to spend a bunch of extra money, but those mistakes and that extra money might be quite less than the banking costs of just holding the land for that much longer. So if you can do a Fasttrack project, instead of something being 15 months, it's say 6 months or 7 months, well, that's a major difference in terms of the overall bank holding costs. Now, if you're out in the middle of the rural areas someplace and there's no real pressure on that, there's really no reason why you would ever do anything like Fasttrack. But in very specific situations, it can make a lot of sense. Like I said, urban situations, but also other situations. Imagine you're doing something for a high school, and that school has to open in August or September, and the project has to get done by then. You may have a limited period of time. Or you're doing a stadium, and the football team's going to play by a certain time. Like, there's all kinds of reasons why that schedule becomes more important than the actual dollar amount. So Fasttrack shows up fairly regularly on the exam, but also just out in the world. It's just that it's a very specific use that only really wants to happen when it's actually necessary for either schedule or financial reasons, because otherwise it's kind of crazy. Another interesting one is multiple prime contracts. Now, the multiple prime contracts is where I might have a whole series of different designers all working simultaneously on the same project. So I might have a set of designers who are doing, say, the shell and core, whereas a different set of designers who might be doing the specialty interiors. So an example where this happens a lot is something like laboratory buildings or university buildings, something where you might have one architect who's involved who does a whole series of big buildings, and they have a lot of experience with that. And then somebody else is involved to do the very specific nature of the laboratory build-out or the acoustical work for the classrooms and auditoriums or something like that. Now, sometimes this is all under one heading, that's a normal contract, but sometimes people decide to do it as these multiple prime contracts. And the reason it's called a prime contract is because nobody's really a sub. They're all prime contracts. They're all essentially the lead contracts for their own topic. The same goes with the GCs. You can have multiple prime contractor GCs. so that you might have one GC who's got a lot of experience and good price point for doing the shell and the core, but then somebody else who would come in and be take over for all the other aspects, the interiors or FF&E or something along those lines, so that you can have separate but simultaneous and not sub multiple prime contracts. They're not working one for the other, they are separate and autonomous prime contracts. It's an interesting way to go. It can make a lot of sense in very specific situations. And sometimes you'll see a little bit of a multiple prime contract on a much bigger project. So it's not always one or the other. Sometimes these things are mixed together a little bit. Sometimes you'll have multiple prime contracts mixed with Fasttrack. Sometimes you'll have multiple prime contracts mixed with a sort of standard GC design bid build process, but only for some aspect of it. So all of these are sort of different ways of how to think about the movement from an idea through the design process into the construction and then finalizing the building. So it's the delivery of the building through that process, project delivery. And you're very likely to get a number of questions on this on the exam.